everyone, today I want to show you how to crochet the continuous join as you go. This is a method of joining your granny squares one by one using the same piece of yarn, so it means there are barely any ends to sew in and the process of joining your granny squares speeds up immeasurably. Obviously, when you are working a continuous join as you go, you do have to have the same coloured border on every single square. If that's not what you're looking for, you can work the standard join as you go, and I will link the video for that up here. But if, like me, you love the look of a contrast round on the outside of every single granny square, then the continuous join is for you. So grab some granny squares, grab your hook, and let's get crocheting. So I have a pile of random little granny squares that we are going to join today. I have a 4mm crochet hook because I'm working in double knit yarn, and I have the yarn that I want to join them all together with. If, like me, you turn your grannies after every single round, then you're going to want to have the wrong side of the outer round facing you. If you don't crochet your grannies like this and you'd like to learn how, then I'll pop a link up here for the video that shows you how I crochet my granny squares. But if you don't turn after every round, this bit doesn't matter quite as much. By having that wrong side facing you when you work your join, you will continue your wrong right pattern that you have been building when you made your squares. Obviously, I'm just using 3 round granny squares for this tutorial, but this method works for any size square that you have. To start our join, we are going to work the top row first. This row is worked slightly differently than the remaining rows, so I will show you how we work our first row first, and then I'll show you how to work the second row, and the second row is the row that you work for every subsequent row after that one. So to start, we want to take our first granny square and we want to get our joining yarn. You want to pop your hook into the corner point of your granny square and pull up a loop and chain 2. If you prefer to chain 3, go ahead and chain 3, but I like to chain 2. Then we are going to work 2 double crochet back into that same corner space of the granny square. Then we're going to chain 2 and work 3 more double crochet into that same space. And that forms our first corner. Then we want to work as if we were working a granny square all the way along this side, all the way along this side, and all the way along this side, but only working half the corner on this side here. So I don't chain between my clusters, so I'm just going to go straight into the next space and work 3 double crochet. And you would do that in every gap along. And then into the corner space, you're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. And then again into every space along the square, depending on how big your square is, you're going to work 3 double crochet. And into the next corner space, again 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So we've now got 2 sides and the first part of the third side crocheted, and we want to now crochet 3 double crochet in every space along, including the corner space. So stop once you've worked 3 double crochet into that corner space. Once you've worked the 3 double crochet into that corner space and you effectively have 3 edges and a little bit around this first square, you want to chain 1. And now we are going to introduce our second square, and you want to work 3 double crochet into this corner space. Make sure you keep this yarn nice and tense when you work this first double crochet so that you don't end up with a loose stitch. But once you've worked the first one, it's easy to carry on and work the next 2 double crochet. Then you will end up with something that looks like this, and we don't want to carry on crocheting just like this, so you want to pull these 2 squares so that their sides are next to each other. However you feel comfortable in the direction that you hold it is fine, like that. So we have now worked 3 double crochet, and we want to join this square here to this side here, and the way we do that is we're going to pop our hook into the space between the set of granny clusters on the opposite side to where we're working, pull up a loop and close it to form a slip stitch, and that has joined this set of clusters to this hole here, and they line up nicely. Then you want to work 3 double crochet into the next space between granny clusters that you have available. And again, once we've worked the 3 double crochet, we are going to put our hook into the corresponding space along, draw up a loop from our working yarn and pull through to form a slip stitch. And again, into the next space along, we're going to do the same. So 3 double crochet and pull up a loop and closed to form a slip stitch. And we now have the corner space with half a corner on each square and our granny spaces lined up and joined. You can see they're not coming apart. Now for the corners, we don't actually want to join these at this stage. We want to leave those, and I'll show you how we join those when we work our second row to give a really nice neat join. So for the next part of the square, we're effectively going back to what we did with our first square. So you're going to work your corner of 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet in every space along until you get to the next corner. And then in the next corner, you are going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. And just like with our first square, we are now going to work 3 double crochet into every space along, including the corner space. We don't work a whole corner cluster onto this third side. Every subsequent square on this first row is joined in exactly the same way. So when we are adding more squares on, we would do the same as with the first square that we added on. So we are going to chain 1, grab our third square in this case, and pop our hook into the corner space. Don't forget, if you are turning your square after every round, you want the wrong side of that final round facing you. Aside from that, it doesn't matter where you join your square. And we're going to work 3 double crochet into that corner space. Flip our work so that they are side by side, pop our hook in and pull up a loop and join it to form a slip stitch. Work 3 double crochet into the next space along, and pop your hook into the next gap along and pull a loop up and close it to form a slip stitch. The one thing when you are joining these sides together is you want to make sure that you line up your granny clusters. So you don't want to accidentally skip a gap and slip stitch this cluster to here, for instance. You want to make sure that they all correspond to the same space on the granny square you're joining to, otherwise you're going to end up with a wonky join. So 3 more double crochet, pop your hook in and slip stitch, and then because we've reached the corner, we're not joining our corners at the moment, so we are going to work a normal corner cluster into that corner. So we're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet without joining to the corner on the square next to us. Now on my project, this is actually the last square that I'm going to work to add width. I'm just working a small baby sample, so you may have 10, 12, however many squares before this one, but you're going to imagine that this orange square here is the last square of width that you are adding onto your blanket. So for this final square, we don't want to work up this edge at all, so we are going to work 3 double crochet into every space along, including the corner space. We are not going to work a corner cluster into that space there, so just 3 double crochet into every space along. Once you've worked your first row, every row until your final row is worked in exactly the same way. So although I'm referring to it as row 2, it's row 2 onwards. It is essentially our repeat row, and row 2 is split into 2 parts. First, we need to join our squares to the blanket, and then we go round to finish them off. Just like we did when we were joining our squares up here, we want to start row 2 with a chain 1, yarn over, ready for our double crochet, and pop your hook into the corner of your next square. And then just like before, we are going to work 3 double crochet into this corner space, and we want to turn our work so that our first row and our second row are underneath each other. And then just like when we were joining the sides together on that first row, you want to pop your hook into the first granny space along, draw up a loop and close it to form a slip stitch. Yarn over and work 3 double crochet into the next granny space. Find your corresponding granny space on the square you're joining to and join with a slip stitch, and then 3 double crochet into any subsequent space along. So if you have a bigger granny square than I do, you will obviously have more spaces before you reach your corner. Join with a slip stitch, and once you get to this corner space, you want to work 3 double crochet into that corner space. Now we are not going to carry on down this side here. We want to join our next square. So this is where our loose corners come in. You want to chain 1 after those 3 double crochet and pop your hook into the corner space of the square that is diagonally across from the square that you're joining. Pull up a loop and pull through to form a slip stitch. So you want to not connect to the corner that's directly above the square you're joining, you want to join to its diagonal partner. Now we're going to introduce the second square of this row, so you want to yarn over, ready for your double crochets, pop your hook into the corner space of the next square and we are essentially doing the same as we did with this first square. We are going to work 3 double crochet into every space along, including the corners. We're not working those as corners at the moment, we're just working double crochets. So you want to work 3 double crochets into that first space, join it with a slip stitch into the corresponding space upwards, making sure you're lining them up nicely. This is the section where you can skew your joins, so make sure that you are joining in the corresponding space of the square above. So 3 double crochet and a slip stitch all the way along, ending with 3 double crochet in the corner space. Once again, after the corner space, you want to chain 1, find the corner space diagonally upwards that should be dangling loose because we didn't join them, pull a loop through that corner space and pull your hook through to join a slip stitch. Yarn over, ready for our first double crochet, and get your next square. Pop your hook into the corner space and work 3 double crochet into that corner space. Don't forget to keep the tension on your yarn nice and tight for the first stitch so that you don't end up with loose joins. So 3 double crochet, find the corresponding space and slip stitch. When you've worked into the last square of the row and you've finished your 3 double crochet into that corner space, you want to not chain, so don't chain after your last double crochet. Pop your hook into the corner space directly above because we have no more diagonals to join, we're at the end of our row, and make a slip stitch. And then what you should have is the first part of your second row completed. So we have worked up and back our first row, and now what you should have is a second row with the top of the second row of squares joined and then them flapping loose. And now we are going to work back round to give them the other 3 sides joined. To start the next part of the join, you want to chain 1 and then work 3 double crochet back into that corner space, and that creates the corner. By working the chain 1 after the slip stitch instead of before it, it just gives you a straighter join and more of a corner appearance on this corner here, because we want to make this square look like it has the chain 2 corner that it normally would have. Then just like on row 1, you want to work all the way around the square, working your 3 double crochets into the side spaces and your 3 double crochet chain 2 into the corner spaces, specifically the bottom 2 corner spaces. For your third edge, you want to work 3 double crochet into every space along, and your 3 double crochet into this final space will complete your corner section. What we now want to do is to join this part of our square here to this loose corner here to tighten it all up. And the way we want to do that is to chain one to give us a little bit more space and pull your loop so that it's big, so that it's not going to frog back. When you're learning this, it's easier to pop your work flat, and you want to pop your hook into the chain two space that is dangling by itself, underneath the chain one that we worked when we joined this cluster here to this corner here, and then pop this loop back on your hook and tighten it up. Then you want to pull this underneath and work a slip stitch, and that joins that corner to this corner nice and sturdy. And then to give us again a little bit more wiggle room when we're working our next set of 3 double crochet, you want to work another chain one, and then we're going to work 3 double crochet into that corner space. Just like before with our other sections where we're joining one to the other, you want to pull up a loop from the corresponding granny space and pull it through to form a slip stitch. All the way along your side, 3 double crochet, pop your hook into the corresponding granny space on the square next to it and draw through to make a slip stitch. When you get to your corner, you are going to chain 2 and work 3 double crochet into that corner space. Just like on row 1, we are not joining these corners, we will do that later. The bottom row is worked exactly the same as the other square, so we're going to go along and put 3 double crochet into every space along, and then work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into that corner space. Just like with this edge, we now want to work 3 double crochet into every space along, including into this corner space that already has 3 double crochet in it from when we worked the joining of the squares at the beginning of our row 2. Just like before, you want to chain 1 and make your loop bigger once you get to that corner. And then to join the corner, you're going to pop your hook into the corner space that is dangling by itself underneath the chain 1 that we worked when we joined those squares to the top row, and pull your loop tight around your hook. Then you're going to pull your hook underneath both those two sections and draw up a loop and close it to form a slip stitch. And then you're going to make one more chain just to give you a little bit of space to work, and then you're going to go ahead and work 3 double crochet into the corner space that should already have 3 double crochet in it from when we joined it to the top edge of row 2. And then just like before, you want to work down the side of the square, working 3 double crochet and into each gap on the square you're working into, and a slip stitch to its partner square just to join it nicely together. So that's 3 double crochet into each space and a slip stitch into the corresponding granny space in the square next to it. When you get to your corner, you want to remember that we are not joining our corners together for rows in the middle of our project. So you want to just work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into that corner space. And then just like with row 1, when we get to the end of row 2, you want to work 3 double crochet into every space along, and you don't want to carry on with your corner. So every row for the rest of your project is worked like this one, with the exception of the final row. So when you are adding length, if you know that you are adding more squares to it, then you work it like this row. I am going to show you how you would work the final row, because we don't want these corners to be dangling. We want them nice and tight like we have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and I'm going to add a third row, and I will meet you here before we start doing that wiggly line backwards to join the sides of them together. So all I'm going to do is go away and complete the first part of row 2 to join 3 more squares onto the top. The final row you work is worked in almost an identical way to the repeat row that you've been working through your entire project. As you can see here, I have completed the first part of my final row in exactly the same way that I completed the first part of my repeat row. So I have joined my squares ready to complete my final row. What you want to do is you want to work round in almost exactly the same way. The only difference is what we do with the corners here. And then once we have joined this final row, we will want to go and fill in this edge nice and neatly so that we get a nice finished article. So just like you did when you worked your repeat row, you want to join with a slip stitch after you work those last 3 double crochet, and then you want to chain 1 and work another 3 double crochet into that same space. The rest of this first square is worked in exactly the same way as your first square on your repeat row. So I'm just going to go around working my 3 double crochet into every granny space, and then working 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into those corner spaces. As with our row 2 repeat row, you want to join your internal corners in exactly the same way. So after you've worked your 3 double crochet into that corner space, you want to chain 1, pull your loop up and remove your hook. Then you want to find the dangling corner that's diagonally upwards and pop your hook into it. Pop your hook underneath the chain 1 from when you joined your squares to the row, and pop the loop back on your hook. Draw it through underneath both those and slip stitch to tightly join it to the corner. Then we're going to chain 1 just for a little bit of extra space, and then just like with our repeat row, we're going to work 3 double crochet into each granny space, and after each set of 3 double crochet we're going to find the corresponding gap on the opposing square, and we're going to slip stitch to join our work to it. When you get to your corner space, this is where you make the change to close the project up nicely. Rather than leaving our corners loose and dangling, we are going to work 3 double crochet into the corner space. And then instead of chaining, we are going to join to the corresponding corner next to it with a slip stitch. And then to give us a little bit more wiggle room and to get it looking more like a corner, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work 3 double crochet back into that corner space. And you can see there that just like on this side here, this side is now joined nice and neatly, and it gives that effect of the finished project rather than leaving your corners loose. The rest of the row is worked in exactly the same way as your repeat row. Just like with our row 2 and this first square here, I'm now going to go ahead and join this corner to this corner. Chain 1 after your final set of 3 double crochet, pull a loop up so that you don't end up accidentally pulling back your stitches, pop your hook in into the corner that's diagonally upwards underneath that chain 1 that you've worked, and pop your hook back onto your work. Pull through underneath both and chain 1 to secure them tightly. Then chain 1 to give a little bit more space and work your join all the way down this side of the square. So we're just working our 3 double crochet slip stitch all the way down the square and then making that adjustment when we get to the corner. Just to recap once again, once you get to the corner, you are going to work 3 double crochet, then you are going to slip stitch into the corner space of the square next to it, chain 1 and then 3 more double crochet back into that same corner space. You may have to do this process several times because you will have more squares than me, but as I only have 3 squares in my project, I'm now approaching the bottom corner of my project. So I'm working 3 double crochet all the way along. And now, because I'm in the corner of my project, what I want to do is now work a round that gives us the same border along the right hand side edge of our project and along the top edge of our project to make it look like what I showed you in the introduction. So this part is really nice and straightforward. Into your corner, you're going to work a normal corner group. So you're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet back into the same corner space. Then you want to work 3 double crochet into each space along, including the corner that has 3 double crochets already in it, and then you want to stop, and I will show you how we finish off the corner of the square to make it nice and neat. What we don't want to do is just to work straight into this section here, because then this corner would not be joined in the square and you'd end up with quite a big gap. The way we get around that is we chain 1, pop our hook into the gap between the 2 granny clusters where you have joined your squares, pull up a loop and join it with a slip stitch. Then you want to chain 1 again, and then you can carry on working your sets of 3 double crochet into those granny spaces. When you get to the next corner space, you're going to work 3 double crochet, and a chain 1. You're going to join with a slip stitch into that gap between the 2 joins like that, chain 1 once more, and then carry on working your 3 double crochet. And you repeat that all the way down the side. When you get to the corner, you're just going to work a completely normal corner group, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, and then along the top edge you're going to do exactly the same thing. So you're going to pop 3 double crochet into every space along, and when you hit a corner you're going to chain 1, slip stitch into the gap between the 2 joins, chain 1 again, and then carry on with your 3 double crochets into every granny space along. When you've finished your final set of 3 double crochet in the final space, all that's left to do is to pop your hook into the second chain that you worked at the very beginning when we were joining to that very first square, and you want to join with a slip stitch to that second chain. Break your yarn, pull through, and there you will have one finished blanket. And in my case, I just have 2 ends. If you use more than one ball of yarn, you would have a couple more ends, but that's better than an end for every single granny square. You can use this method to join all sorts of different granny squares. I've used it for sunburst granny squares, I've used it for granny circle granny squares, and I am currently using it on a mitered granny square. Once you know this method, you can work it on any number of different granny squares. You don't just have to stick to the plain old granny square that I have shown you here. As always, I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you do use it and find it useful, I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you again for another video soon. Bye!